Darko, the founder of African Reform Movement, ARM for short, whose motto or slogan is bridging the gap. Now, Doc, hello.
Hello.
Can you tell us in few words why the motto bridging the gap?
Thank you very much. Bridging the gap basically stands for the fact that our country is very heterogeneous in different directions. Regionally, north and south, there is a gap. Intra-regionally, rural and city, there is a gap. Educationally, rural and city, there is a gap. Technologically, in every aspect of our life, we have gaps. And we know that stability only occurs when there is homogeneity, when the various sectors are about equal. So moving forward, without bridging the gap, we'll have this instability of movement, of all sorts of things. So when we say bridging the gap, is a motto which signifies our desire to make Ghanaians one, to create a fair state in Ghana.
Fantastic. So would that bridging of the gap also be compared, would I be right to comparing Ghana to the rest of the world?
Exactly.
Especially the West?
Exactly. Bridging the gap internally is what I was speaking about.
Yes.
Now there is an external arm. It's the same movement. For instance, the same way people move rural-urban migration, where people move from the rural areas in Ghana to the city, is the same movement we have from Ghana to UK to US and wherever. People always move along a gradient. The people always move along socio-economic gradient, where they believe that their future lies, where they believe that the economic prosperity lies, they will move towards that place. So the more we develop Ghana, the more we're able to retain those who want to move out.
So, Doctor, speak a little bit about the actual gap. What is this gap?
Okay. For instance, let's look at Ghana. In the last Ghana Living Standard survey that was done, 78% of poverty in Ghana is in the rural areas.
Okay.
Now, the rural areas form only about 50% of our population. So you have 78% in rural areas and you have 22% in urban areas. What it means is that the rural areas are carrying the burden of poverty. Okay,
Yes.
78 for 50%, 22 for 50%. So there is a big rural-urban gap, economic gap. Now, that is on the whole, but even within the rural system, now 40% of rural people in Ghana live in the south, and 10% of rural live in the north. So the 50% rural people, 10% are in the three northern regions, and 40% are in the southern regions. But
The urban centers.
no, the rural. So first we spoke about rural-urban. We have 70% of poverty in the rural areas.
That's right.
Now we are talking of rural. Even within the rural areas, you have 40% in the south and 10% in the north. But in terms of distribution of poverty, we have about the same.
Okay.
So what it means is that the prevalence of poverty is 4 times more in the north than in the south.
That's right.
So now, when you're talking about these gaps, you're talking inter-regional gap, intra-regional gap. You're talking about gap in the rural areas and gap in the urban centers. So in brief, this is where if you want to create a fair Ghana, then if we have 10% in one place and we have 20% in another place, the poverty should not be the same. It should be proportional.
Okay. Exactly. Thank you. Now, how about the gap comparing Ghana or Africa as a whole to the more developed world? So where do we want to go in bridging this gap?
Yeah, okay. Let's take a very typical example. population, let's take population of Ghana, about 27 million. Population of Australia, about 24 million. Okay, so we can say reasonably comparable. Now, the GDP of Ghana is about 40 billion. Okay, dollars. The GDP of Australia is 1.6 trillion.
Wow.
So Australia is 40 times richer than Ghana. Now, and this will manifest in everything, in the level of education, level of healthcare, level of transport, general infrastructure, because that's what actually makes the country. Obviously, if we want to do something about Ghana, if we want to bridge this gap, then we've got to look at how we spend the little that we have. Here's a situation where Ghana has 40 billion as its total net worth. And Australia has got 40 times more than that. But Ghana has got about 80 ministers. And Australia can have only 30 ministers. Obviously, a bigger proportion of our little money is going into the government structure. So now, when we say we are closing the gap, we are first of all trying to cut our clothes according to the size of cut our clothes. Is that correct?
Cloth.
Yeah. Cut
our cloth.
Our cloth according to the size of our material. And we have to take things which do not matter, or we have to
prioritize.
You know what I mean? Yeah, that's right. As it is now, we are not making any effort to bridge the gap. In actual fact, we are increasing the gap by increasing our debt, because we are spending way beyond our means.
So let me interrupt you for a moment. So you believe that the gap that exists is largely our fault?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Elaborate a little bit about that.
Because fundamentally, development, all these things we talk about come down to development. Development depends on good governance. It doesn't matter how you look at it. Development depends on good governance, and we govern ourselves. If we decide that we're going to do the right things, like the places we run away to do, I can tell you things can change like this. Look at these primaries that NDC held yesterday, and the amount of money aspirants spent on these little primaries.
Yesterday being the 21st of November 2015.
Yeah. You know, look at the amount of money that I've heard that people spend on primaries. Compare it to the average income of the country. You are in this country in Australia, and when there are elections, you don't even know they are campaigning, because everything is done in town halls and, places. And people send flyers and things like that. People send emails. Obviously, these people are spending money they have no end. And you cannot blame anybody if a government decides to spend its money in primaries, or government decides to spend its money in election. And that's why I say that we have to go back to a drawing board. Now, all these things we are talking about have become so critical because of a fundamental flaw in our constitution: the winner takes all. It makes everything life and death. And that's where we are coming from. I'm sure along the line, some of your questions will help me to highlight more on these issues.
We're still talking about the gap.
Okay. So now, in order to close the gap, bridge the gap, you got to say your priorities.
Exactly.
You have to decide that, okay, we are spending, in order to close the gap this way, we got to spend 10% of our GDP on health. And in terms of health, we're going to spend so much on primary health care, because that's where we find most of our diseases. Or we're going to spend more, but you have to come out with a clear program where the money will go to. And of course, you got to look at the government structure itself. Decide that, look, we cannot do it this way. We have to cut this and cut that. So bringing the gap as a policy comes straight down to priorities, where money goes. One
more question on bridging the gap. Do you believe that it is possible? My understanding of the gap is also that, for instance, move us from a developing country to a more developed country, move the rural areas to be more independent rather than dependent on the central government. So move perhaps somebody who is in the lower class to maybe the upper
Social
class.
mobility.
So it's a gap on several levels,
yeah.
whether it's economic or whatever. Is it possible really to bridge, to aspire towards bridging the gap between, say, Ghana and Australia or Ghana and London? Is it realistic?
Yeah, very realistic. Very, very realistic. You see, some of us have bridged the gap in our personal lives. We know how to bridge the gap because we know where we started from. We know those who met in secondary school. We know those who met in 6-4. And we know those who met in university. Bridging the gap again depends on leadership and focus. Ghana can definitely bridge the gap. Ghana will never be like America. Ghana will not be like United Kingdom. Because even in the West, there are superpowers and there are powers. That's the nature of life. Okay. But we can position ourselves that will make it undesirable for people to leave Ghana to those places. We can actually make Ghana a manageable and a thriving economy. That's what we are looking at. And we can improve political, economic, and social mobility. Fundamental to this, that's the point people don't understand. Fundamental to this is the political structure, where you bring government closer to the people. Because once you bring government closer to the people, then people are able to be part of the government. When government is far from people, they are never part of it. We want to bridge the gap between the governed and the governing. And fundamental to that is the federal structure we've been talking about. You see, all these things will come to it because in Australia, we know how the system works. We are here 3 hours outside Melbourne. And there is no desire to go to Melbourne because you can do everything here. And it's because of that structure. Because these are all executive instruments that, if it's far away from the people, it's very hard to implement at the local level.
Now, what would you say to the Ghanaian who's sitting there and saying, well, Doc, Australia is not Ghana. People have a certain mindset here in Ghana that makes a lot of what Ghanaians from abroad who come back home, what they want to implement, things they want to achieve, things they see as possible, that makes it almost impossible to do because fundamentally our mindset is not at the right place. What would you say to those people?
I will tell them that thing that Steve Jobs said. He said societies are there to be reshaped. And with that philosophy, he has reshaped the telephone and the what do you call those gadgets? The tablets. He reshaped the whole world through telephone and tablets. Communication. He said societies are there to be reshaped. Mindsets will always be mindsets, but they were formed from a certain paradigm, and that paradigm can change. When you tell people why they are where they are and how they can come out from there, believe me, they will try and do something about it. The thing is that people have not projected to them the better alternative. Why would somebody want to jump in a plane or go through Sahara to go to Europe if you can bring Europe to the person? If you can tell the person it is possible, why would the person say, no, I don't want to believe that? People want solutions. The problem we have had so far is rhetoric and no clear agenda about how those things could be done. Ghana is not Australia, but Ghanaians are human beings created by God, just as Australians are human beings created by God. And from the beginning, we're all asked to be what? Fruitful, multiply, replenish, and subdue the earth. Every human being has got that potential to be fruitful and to multiply. We haven't done that in Ghana. From the level of the government to the last person. And that is where the gap is. We have to be fruitful. we have to multiply, we have to replenish, and we have to have dominion, we have to have control over our environment, and of our country, and our resources. That is the problem. Once we understand that we have the same capability as other people, like Marcus Garvey said, what one man has done, another man can do. Once we have that, and we have that self-belief, and we have good leadership, it is possible.
Thank you very much, Doc. On that note, this closes the series on the gap.
Yeah.